let's talk about January 14th, 2026. That's the day the nation's supposedly most reliable network just disappeared. Millions of people were left completely disconnected, completely vulnerable. And look, this was so much more than just a dropped call. This was the moment our entire digital safety net just collapsed. So we're going to dig in. We're not just going to talk about what happened during the Great Verizon Outage, but the really critical part, the how and the why. And if you want to understand just how high the stakes were, you just have to read this. This was the actual, real advice being sent out by city officials in places like New York and DC. I mean, think about that. It's a shocking admission that the whole modern, high-tech emergency system we all just assume is there for us had completely evaporated. We were told to literally go back to the analog age. The scale of this was just mind-boggling. At its absolute peak, we're talking over 1.7 million separate outage reports filed from people all across the country. An entire digital world, everything from how we buy things to how we talk to each other, just went dark all at once. So how did this 10-hour digital blackout actually play out? Let's walk through the timeline of how this whole thing fell apart and the immediate, paralyzing chaos it caused. Okay, so it all kicked off at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, right smack in the middle of a workday. Service just vanished across 4 time zones from LA all the way to Atlanta. By 3 p.m., when the reports hit their peak, the entire country was basically thrown back to the 1990s. No GPS, no work chats, no digital payments, nothing. And it took almost 10 full hours before the network finally slowly started to flicker back to life. Now This right here might be the single most terrifying part of the whole story. You know, we all see that little SOS icon on our phones, and we just assume it's our lifeline. It's the one thing that will always work, so we can call 911. But for millions of people, that promise was completely broken. The system that's supposed to piggyback on other carriers in an emergency, it just dissolved. It was a cry for help that literally no one could hear. And that brings us to the real heart of this whole mess, the anatomy of the failure. We're shifting gears now from the what to the why. I mean, how could a system this massive, this important, be so incredibly fragile? Well, at first, pretty much everyone's mind jumped to the same conclusion. You have to remember the geopolitical climate back in 2026. The immediate thought was sabotage. It had to be a foreign adversary finally hitting our critical infrastructure. I mean, the way it happened all at once, nationwide, it certainly looked and felt like a coordinated attack. But the real reason was, well, it was a lot less dramatic, but in a way almost more concerning. By late that night, CISA, that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, they, along with law enforcement, came out and said it wasn't a hack. It wasn't some hostile state. The problem was internal, a catastrophic failure baked right into their own network architecture. And this explains the core problem perfectly. This entire national outage boiled down to a single point of failure. The easiest way to think about it is like this. That one server hub in New Jersey was basically the main circuit breaker for a huge chunk of the national network. It wasn't just managing local traffic. It was the centralized brain telling millions of phones, yep, you're good, you can connect. So when that one breaker blew, the system didn't have a backup plan. It didn't reroute. It just went dark. And the thing that tripped this national paralysis, it wasn't some sophisticated, state-of-the-art cyber weapon. No. All the evidence points to something shockingly mundane. It was either a software update that went wrong and crashed the system, or just a simple hardware short circuit. So here's the key takeaway. This wasn't a cybersecurity failure. This was a failure of architectural design. They built a system that was fast, but not fail-safe. All right, so let's move into the aftermath. Let's talk about Verizon's attempt at damage control and what a lot of people started calling the $20 insult. So, Verizon's big apology, their grand gesture to make things right, a $20 credit on your account. Now, for businesses that lost thousands of dollars that day, or for people who missed life or death appointments, you can imagine how that went over. It felt like a slap in the face. And it totally shifted the conversation from their infrastructure failure to a massive consumer insult. And, of course, there was a catch. The credit wasn't automatic. You had to go into the app and actively claim it. This is a classic business playbook move called a breakage strategy. The company is betting that a huge number of people just won't bother for $20, which, in the end, saves them millions. It was less about truly making customers whole and a lot more about damage control for the headlines. But, you know, the fallout from that insulting $20 credit might actually lead to something good. This whole blackout could be the thing that finally forces real, lasting change, and probably very expensive change for the carriers, pushed not by them, but by the government. And this slide really lays out the huge shift that's being proposed. On the left, you've got the current SOS system, which we now know is basically a broken promise. On the right, you have the proposed FCC mandate, something called emergency data roaming. This would force all carriers to automatically switch your phone over to a competitor's network for everything: data, messages, calls, if your main network goes down. This would turn network reliability from just a marketing slogan into a legal requirement. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because what this blackout really exposed was our own fragility as a society. It showed we're caught in a digital dependency trap, where we've slowly, system by system, traded away resilience just to get a little more convenience. I mean, the stories from those 10 hours are just staggering. People were literally stranded because their phone was their car key. Digital payment systems, transit cards, they just froze. That critical multi-factor authentication you need to log into work? Gone. Even just proving who you are with a text message code became impossible. You see, when the signal goes away, you don't just lose your social media feed, you lose access to the basic functions of modern life. So what's the lesson here? You can't just wait around for the FCC to fix this. You've got to build your own personal redundancy. Use the dual SIM tech in your phone to have a cheap data plan from a rival carrier. Make sure Wi-Fi calling is turned on, download offline maps for your area, and, the ultimate low-tech failsafe, carry a $20 bill. Ironically, it might be the most valuable $20 you have, way more than the credit you had to go claim. At the end of the day, if one little hardware short can paralyze the country for 10 hours, you have to see this as a massive dress rehearsal for something worse, something more targeted. So I'll leave you with this question to really think about. What essential thing, physical or financial, did you realize you couldn't access during that blackout? Because that vulnerability, that's now yours to solve.